Guys are making more money in prison than they are on the street. They're selling hooch, they're selling phone time, they're selling drugs, they're doing all these different things, making thousands of dollars.
Before we dive in, it's important to remember that the information we provide is for informational purposes only. Every situation is unique, and decisions regarding your health or legal matters should be made after consulting with your own doctor or lawyer. Our aim is to inform and empower, but personal circumstances require personalized advice. Welcome to another episode of Justice in Scrubs. I'm attorney Richard Hastings, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Dr. Jeff Michaelis.
And get ready to be locked in with Ian Bick. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. As you guys know, we share the same studio, and you guys have been teaching me about podcasting, and it's really exciting.
Well, hopefully it's helped you in your journey in podcasting. And
it's nice having professionals in this building and not a bunch of felons running around. The deli downstairs was starting to get a little upset with us. So now we have some professionals in the building.
Well, you're actually teaching us how to be podcasters, and we're just teaching you content. Yeah. So it's a nice transition.
And
okay, girls, can we get into the podcast now?
I'm trying to lighten the mood a little bit. You know, Jeff's moving and grooving. He's shooting back some jokes at us. Look at, he's happy. He's smiling.
So we want to talk about first, before we talked about you in prison, what was it like when you found out that you have to go to prison?
Well, I never thought I would actually go to prison until they were physically removing me, from the courthouse in handcuffs and dragged out because I got my bond revoked. And I went to the detention center in Rhode Island. It was called the Wyatt Detention Center. And I was waiting there for sentencing. And that was my first experience. I remember going on the bunk bed, and they put me, and this is actually a great topic, they put me in a cell with a guy that was coming off of an addiction. So what they do is they just throw these addicts into the cell, and then you're just stuck there. That's how they detox. There's no medicine for them. It's just they sweat it out. So that's an interesting from a health point of view and a legal point of view of whether that's the right way to kind of help someone in those settings.
Wow, that was your introduction to prison?
Yeah, he was asking me, are you going to eat your sandwich, this and that. He was jittering all over, got on the bunk, off the bunk, kept walking around the little cell that was smaller than this room we're in right now.
What were your thoughts going through? What was your feelings? And
I was like, there was two things. One, I was like shocked I was there. It doesn't really hit you, But then the other part was a little bit of a relief because I was running this club and I was under a lot of pressure and financial pressure, and everyone wanted money and this and that. And so I was like removed from that. So it was a big help.
So Matt, you're going to edit this, and then I'm going to ask the first question because we didn't even get the intro into what's going on. So this part will go first, and then Jeff's question will go next. So Ian, thank you for joining.
Jeff, you messed up.
I didn't mess up.
So Ian, thank you for joining us today. Could you start off by telling our listeners a bit about your background and how you ended up in prison?
We should probably just restart the whole thing.
All right, let's restart the whole thing.
Yeah, let's take it from the top. Let's make it easier.
All right, we're going to start all over. Okay, so we already did the intro?
No, it's easier to edit it from the top.
Okay,
it's a
so we'll
quick
start
intro.
We'll start from the beginning.
Now that the mood's lightened up.
Okay. Don't lighten him up anymore.
No, I think it's good. Maybe you guys do that every time too, just to get warmed up, go converse with the guest and then restart. That could be a good idea.
Yeah, we did that last time.
Just to joke with the guest a little bit, make it a joke just to ease it. And then you say, all right, now we're going to start for real.
Welcome to another episode of Justice in Scrubs. I'm attorney Richard Hastings, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Dr. Jeff Michaelis.
And today, get ready to be locked in with Ian Bick. We have Ian Bick joining us today. Ian, welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, thank you guys so much for having me. We're at Creative Evolution Studios, and you guys started your podcast journey a couple months ago, and it's been exciting to see you guys grow.
And you've been a great mentor to each of us, and thank you.
Likewise, yeah, we're all in this together at this point.
So could you start off by telling our listeners a little bit about your background and how you ended up in prison?
So I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, and in the same neighborhood where you live right now. And I went to school, Danbury Public Schools. I was in private school for a little bit. Ended up, just getting into promoting parties, and that got into doing these teen nights where I'd made significantly good money in high school as a 16-year-old. There was nights I was making $10,000 in cash once a month. It was a great business, but I was just a super ambitious, shoot for the moon, but you don't know how to necessarily get there type of individual. Got in over my head, started raising money for these concerts. All the concerts failed. Lied to kind of cover up those investments and the losses because I didn't want anyone to not like me. And ultimately, those lies caught up with me, and I got arrested by the FBI, the IRS, local police, Department of Banking, all of these organizations. And, while that's going on, I get this idea to reopen that nightclub that I used to promote at. So I end up, by the grace of God, opening this nightclub, booking these major acts, the Chainsmokers, Steve Aoki, big acts, and running that club until I ultimately got my bond revoked from going out of state to gamble at the Empire City Casino because I wasn't 21 and I couldn't go to Mohegan yet, which is the Connecticut casino, and then got my bond revoked and sent to prison when I was 21. Spent the whole time I was 21 in federal prison.
Wow. Why don't you tell us, what were your feelings? What were your thoughts going through when you found out you had to go to prison?
I never expected I was going to go to prison. I was a very cocky, arrogant out there. And it didn't really hit me until like that first night where you're actually locked in the cell. And that first night I was stuck with someone that was just got picked up, got his bond revoked too. And he was high on I think heroin. And when you're in a cell with someone like that, when they're detoxing, they're not giving you any medicine. It's one tray of food. It's basically like a sandwich, an apple, and a juice for the newcomers because you normally miss your meal, but the hot meal that they have when you're taken off the street. And he was just kind of jumping up and down, walking back and forth, sweating profusely. We were in a cell smaller than this. You share a toilet, it's 2 bunk beds, no pillows. They don't have any pillows. And that was the setting. And it's a cold cell. And, it's interesting to hear from a doctor's point of view, what kind of like if that's an accurate way they should be helping individuals detox and what the ramifications are from that too.
Well, they can actually have a seizure and die if they don't detox properly. So, and we have very good medications to help patients detox. So I think that's wrong on multiple levels. What about a legal situation?
Well, I mean, it depends upon the ultimate outcome, and that, everything flows from that.
Yeah, so there is definitely good medication to detox people and make it a lot easier on the patient.
Yeah, I know they, I think sometimes they give individuals Suboxone. But
there's a lot of different medicines, yeah.
But with Suboxone, that's also a major drug issue in prison that individuals are selling Suboxone strips and making money off of it too.
Well, there's ways of controlling controlled substances. I mean, they lock them up, and so I don't think that's an issue. But that's I don't really understand everything that goes on in prison, but patients in prison should get the proper medical care. At least.
Yeah, it's tough. And that's what we're going to dive into today. That's why this episode works because there is a lot of lack of knowledge, I should say, about healthcare in prison.
Well, let me back up a little bit. How old were you when you went to prison?
I was 21.
And where did you first go to prison?
I went to the Wyatt Detention Center in Rhode Island, and from there I kind of went all over. I got the diesel therapy prison experience is what they call it.
So they drive you up in a van and they let you out, and then how do they process you, and what's that whole situation like? I mean, we see movies where they do these things, but I'm curious as from the inside what happens.
So you're taken in a van. You're at the courthouse because there's no county jails in Connecticut for the federal system, so it's kind of they have a holding center in the courthouse. So they take you in a van, you're chained and shackled, put onto it, your feet are shackled, hands are shackled to your waist, and they bring you to there. Now, any prison you go to, at least on the federal side, their intake's kind of all the same. You're waiting and receiving. You're waiting on like a cold bench with the door shut, and there's a bunch of people because multiple people are getting transported, and they call you up one by one to strip out naked, change into the prison clothes that are designated for that prison. And then you'll see a counselor who will ask you, like, are you suicidal? Are you gang related? Just like basic questions. If you gave them a serious answer, who knows if they'll actually act on it or not. And then you see a doctor at everyone where they give you a new TB shot. You get your TB shot taken because you're isolated until, I guess, the bump has to come up, or no bump, whatever the terminology is. And they do that. They ask any medical issues, your basic stuff. They'll give you medicine if you're being transported from another prison with medicine on you. They always let you take your medicine in like a bag from prison to prison. That doesn't get shipped. And then once that whole process, which will normally take like 6 or 7 hours, something that should take an hour takes, 10 times that amount. And then you're put into your unit.
So what was a typical day like for you?
Typical day varied kind of on the place, but when I got to my permanent spot, I would wake up, say 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., whenever count time was. You have to make your bed. You go to a job if you have a job, or you could pay someone to kind of do your job. When I was at the prison camp, I'd wake up at 4 a.m. because I was the prison baker. And I would wake up at 4 a.m. kind of, some of these federal prisons have scratch bakeries. So I would make fresh, you're getting a kick out of this, fresh bagels I learned how to make, fresh donuts, fresh pizza dough. And we would smuggle the pizza dough back to make nice professional pizzas back in the unit out of the microwave. But yeah, the fresh bakery is awesome. Danbury Federal Prison actually has a fresh bakery too. So you get like fresh made strudels, muffins, all that, cookies.
Wow.
It's pretty fancy in there. That's what your tax dollars are going to, for the inmates to make some bakery items. So
let's go back to the medical issue. And did you have any medical problems come up when you were in the prison? Did you have to go to the infirmary or anything like that?
When I first got locked up, I had like this bump on my knee where I thought I was like I had something, I don't know, like a tumor or something in my knee. And then they gave me x-rays and they brought me down and they said everything was fine. And they said, just stop touching it or something like that. That's what they told me. But I didn't have any real issues, me personally, medically, until when I went to the low security federal prison where I was getting like migraines and headaches like every time I was like moving my head. So their advice was, basically anytime you go to the doctor, you can't just show up there. It's not like an urgent care or an emergency room unless you're like dying on the sidewalk there. But you can't just go and say, hey, I'm not feeling good, I need to talk to you. You have to schedule it in advance, and it's like a call out. And then like once or twice a week, they have a sick line where you have to wake up. They make it very hard. You got to get up at the crack of dawn. And if you're not there in that window, you're not seeing that doctor. So on this day, I got up and went in there very early. And a lot of them are, they're dressed in army, like they're military doctors or army doctors. Even the doctors, they don't wear coats, lab coats. They all wear, like the nurses, like these military jumpsuit type of wear. I've never really seen it before until I was in prison. And I think it's like a blue color, like a navy blue. And so I'm waiting for like 2 hours. And this is, when I had the headaches. And then I also had the flu in prison before too. And they look at you and all they say is, get some Tylenol on your next commissary visit. They don't prescribe you any medication. They don't help you with anything unless like you're severely ill and you need something. But the Medicare in the system is terrible. They make you wait it out before you get any actual real help.
So the medical challenges you had were very few.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you in the prison system process? I mean, how long did you stay in one facility and where did you go and what was that like?
I kind of hopped all over. My longest stay was at the camp in Wisconsin. I stayed there for a year. But other places like at Wyatt, the first one I was there 2 months. Brooklyn, I was there a month. Fort Dix, the low security, I was there 6 months, 7 months. Danbury, I was there almost 5 months. I was kind of all over. But each place has the same process where you see that first doctor or nurse when you're coming in for intake, the TB shot, all of that, check your records. Dentist, you can see them once a year for, I guess, technically a cleaning, but it's not really a cleaning. They just like pick at your teeth with the metal scraper. It was never like a cleaning I experienced. And if you need any dental work actually done, you have to schedule that like very far out. in advance. Everything takes, it's a very slow, painful process to get anything done.
And what would cause you to stay 2 months at one facility and 5 months at another and a year at another? Was there something that triggered them to move you?
So it was the normal process when I was in transit, hopping from place to place until I got to Fort Dix, which was my first designated spot. I was at a low security. I didn't go to a camp right off the bat because of my age. So based on your age and other factors, like if you have a detainer like Steve Bannon, if you have pending charges, you can't go to a camp. In my case, because I was only 21, I had extra points, so that put me over the limit to go to a camp. So I went to a low, which is behind the fence. And I had gotten into some trouble there. Some guys were trying to extort me, take advantage of me, because I was a young white kid with glasses. They all thought I was a sex offender. Like if you two gentlemen went to prison right now, they would automatically label you as a sex offender just because you're white and old. No offense.
Older.
But they're just looking at you, that you guys would be in that category. You'd be like fresh meat in their eyes. And you wouldn't have the best time there at a low. But anyways, I got transferred there because our room got raided and there's a ton of contraband cell phones. And we got caught with some phones in the room. And I was on a video on one of the phones that got into it. And we were like wrestling on the ground. And they thought I was like in danger, so they locked me up, put me in protective custody, locked the whole room up, and then they ended up shipping me to Danbury. I got to Danbury, and I'm thinking this is great. And this is after it took so Danbury to New Jersey is an hour and a half trip. It took them 8 weeks to get me to Danbury. 8 weeks. They moved me to Brooklyn, then to Philadelphia, where I was in the Philadelphia solitary. Because when you move from one solitary unit to another prison, you have to stay in solitary until you get to that new prison. So they put me in, I was in solitary with this guy that had got busted by an undercover FBI agent at the prison I was just recently at for soliciting kiddie porn on a jump drive in the prison library. So I was in there. You know who else I was in there with? The DA from Philadelphia that got busted back in 2017 for corruption. I forgot his name.
He probably didn't have fun there either.
No, but they had him in protective custody. So he was there. He got a 5-year sentence. He was busted right in office. The FBI task force got him. So finally I get to Danbury, and I'm like, this is great. I'm a few minutes away from my parents. I mean, the prison's 10 minutes from here.
You can go home on the weekends and have dinner.
I would get visits regularly. Everything was good. And then what ends up happening is a prison guard reported that I used to date his cousin years prior. So they said that was a conflict of interest, and they put me back in solitary. And because of my experience in Danbury, that's why like the news, like CNN and whatnot, are so interested, because celebrities are starting to get sentenced to the Danbury prison. It's an infamous prison. Orange is the New Black is based off of that prison. So that's how I ended up in Danbury. And I sat in solitary there for almost 5 months before they transferred me to. I went on a bus, went to Con Air, went to Oklahoma City, then I went to Chicago. And then I went finally to Wisconsin.
So what's solitary like? I mean, how long are you in solitary? What can you do? What can't you do?
So solitary, you're in like a room maybe like the same length as this, but it's kind of narrower, cut in half. You have a bunk bed, all metal. It has a thin mattress, no pillows, one blanket, a sheet, and a bed sheet. You have one stainless steel toilet, no lid to open it up or down. Sometimes you'll get a bunkmate. You kind of go crazy with that one. But on the downside, if you have a bunkmate, you got to listen to them, fart, pee, poop. You get all those smells. That's what you wake up to, your bunkmate butt-ass naked sitting on the toilet, So it's pretty interesting, and you can only shower 3 times a week. They'll handcuff you behind your back and bring you to another cage, which has the shower in it. Sometimes there is a shower custom built into that cell. And then you can't... you get rec 3 times a week, which is in another, cell. 5 times a week.
What?
Recreation.
Oh, time.
So they'll handcuff you at like 5 a.m. and bring you outside to another cage that's just outside. You're not really getting much sun. There's no windows in the shoe, and it's a very dreadful place.
We wanted to take a quick break to remind you about our sponsor, findagreatattorney.com. Dealing with the aftermath of an accident or injury can be overwhelming. And the last thing you want to worry about is finding the right lawyer. FindAGreatAttorney.com simplifies the process by connecting you with one of the top attorneys in your area who specializes in your specific type of case. Whether you've been injured in a car accident, suffered a slip and fall, or experienced medical malpractice, FindAGreatAttorney.com has a network of experienced lawyers ready to help. And remember, their service is completely free, so you can focus on your recovery without worrying about the cost of legal representation. If you or someone you know needs legal assistance, don't hesitate to visit FindAGreatAttorney.com and let them match you with one of the best lawyers in your area for your needs. Wow. So how do you take care of yourself physically? And then I'm curious as to what your mental health was like during this time.
So physically, I got into the best shape of my life from that time in solitary because you're forced to go on a diet. The meals there are very scarce, and when you're in solitary, you're only getting 3 meals a day, and it's so spaced out where it like forces you to fast because breakfast comes at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. I wasn't a morning person, so I'd skip breakfast, and a lot of the time it's just like a milk, a fruit, and a pastry, and I wasn't really big on the sweets. So I'd skip that. Lunch would be at like 10:30 a.m. You get what you get on your tray, and then which are all small portions. They were probably feeding you more in high school, honestly, and we're grown, adult men. And then the last meal of the day would come at like 3:30. So I was going from 3:30 meal to 11 a.m. No food.
You started intermittent fasting.
Pretty much, yeah. And I lost over 100 pounds. I was like 295. If you look at the old photos of me, I was very chubby. I had a big double chin. I had big gut. I was a big boy. No muscle.
So you're doing push-ups and chin-ups and all kinds of things like that?
That's how I first started. So solitary is what really got me into my fitness routine because before that I was just eating the commissary, eating like crap, eating, like the honey buns have like, you look on the back of one of those, there's like 2,000 calories. Some of the guys in there, they have 3 honey buns a day.
Wow.
Yeah, the metabolism of some of these guys is incredible. Like these guys in prison that they're able to eat that. It's like 100-something grams of sugar on top of everything else. So I was doing push-ups, sit-ups. That's how I first got into it. And then when I finally got out and I was at the camp, that's when I was really dialed in because I would run every day around like the track. I would run probably like a 20-minute run. After every meal with some of the older gentlemen and my bunkmate, we would walk. So they say it's pretty good for you after a meal you walk around to digest. We would do that. And then we use cinder blocks to weight lift, cinder blocks and poles. We would put the cinder blocks on like a bench press. And then for legs, you would go under the picnic table and someone would sit on it and you would pick the picnic table up to hit legs.
Wow.
It was very ingenious. For arm curls, we would just put mini cinder blocks, mini bricks. You put holes in the bricks to kind of lift up with the bars, and we created a whole workout thing. Because a lot of these prisons don't have weights anymore.
Oh, because they could be dangerous.
Exactly.
And then what about your mental health? How was that?
I've always been like a very determined, like mentally tough individual. So I wasn't necessarily like depressed. I think one of the hardest things for me was like when you're on a contraband phone and you see life doesn't stop. Like when you go on social media and you see like all the people that posted negative stuff about you, and you also see everyone still living. Like my friends were all off at college, they were partying, they had girlfriends, this and that. That's the mentally draining part. I think if you don't have that, it's a little bit easier because then sometimes it's better to not know. You don't know what an ex-girlfriend's doing, you don't know this or that, so that's mentally draining.
How did you get a contraband phone?
So a lot of the guards bring them in at the camp. Inmates would run through the woods because there's no fence to smuggle them back in. And you could buy them at the Lowe's. It's supply and demand. So behind the fence, they're like $1,500, $2,000, $3,000. They would charge them in the ceiling lights like this. They would make an adapter where you plug it into an MP3 player and that kind of charges the phone. You put the battery pack up there because the reason why you don't use an iPhone is because an iPhone you can't take the battery out. These Androids, like these Boost Mobile, you get a Boost Mobile phone plan, which is like untraceable, and they're like $50 a month unlimited data. And this is how like Boost Mobile stays in business because they're supplying the U.S. prison system. And you have someone from the outside put minutes on. And anyways, you leave just the battery and the lights while the fan's going on or whatever. So when the cops raid the room, they're always looking in the lights. But regardless, if your battery gets popped by the guards, that's only $100 or $200 replacement. If the phone gets caught, that's your bread and butter, you know, and guys would rent phone time. Like you could rent, say you go up to one of the guys that had a phone, $15 for an hour phone time, and they're watching the phone. They'll run in when a guard's walking by and grab it from you. They would make pockets in their groin area to hold the phone in there when a guard was coming by, all of this stuff.
So there was like an underground commerce in the prison?
Oh, it's huge. Guys are making more money in prison than they are on the street. They're selling hooch, they're selling phone time, they're selling drugs, they're doing all these different things, making thousands of dollars, gambling, sports betting, the bookies, all of that. It's an unbelievable marketplace.
Where do they get all the money?
So the money, the currency, now they're using Cash App, like on the phone, because there's so many contraband phones. But before, they would use fish pouches of mackerel and books of stamps. That would work as commissary. And to convert that into dollars, so say you're Jeff and you come to someone with like 100 mackerels, the book guy, and like the guy that runs a sports book, and you want to use mackerels to buy food from the food from the chow hall. Say you have a contract with a worker in the chow hall that can get you fresh onions, peppers, salad greens, meats every day, and he wants 5 mackerels every time. So you want to buy your mackerels in bulk from someone because at commissary you're paying full price. So you would go to the book guy and you would say, "Here, I'll give you $100. Give me 125 mackerels." So that guy now has cash for his mackerels that he sold to get that currency, and now you have the mackerels to pay market to use for currency, like getting a haircut, anything like that.
Getting a haircut? Who gives you a haircut?
So this is the funny thing about the haircut system in prison is each prison has a designated employee, like a designated inmate that's the barber who gets paid $30 or $40 a month. These barbers use that as a hustle. So they'll not only are they getting paid from the prison, but if you go to them for a haircut, they're going to charge you 6 or 7 mackerels plus tip, which is still the cheapest haircut you're ever going to get. And these guys are great. You know, now you go to a place it's $60 for a haircut. It's crazy. At the prison, it's $10 out the door, and it's the best haircut you're going to get in your life.
So the mackerels are like a different currency?
Yep, mackerels, tunas, everything like that as a currency. Or the bodybuilders, they would use that as protein because there's 25 grams of protein. Like you guys are big fish guys. You'd be munching on the mackerels every day, and then they have these yellowfin tunas in a nice chili sauce that you can eat straight out. They would just pop them open and eat them plain. Put them on pizza. It's actually really good on pizza, the mackerel.
Especially with the homemade dough.
Yeah, the problem is the sodium levels. I was interviewing a guy yesterday on my show. He said he had a huge health scare yesterday after serving, almost 20 years in federal prison. I forgot what the exact medical diagnosis was, but the doctor said his levels, pH levels or whatever levels, were ridiculous, and the doctor said it was probably because of the food he was eating there.
Maybe mercury levels.
But the sodium, one pack of ramen noodles, I think the sodium's like 1,200 milligrams.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that no one ever talks about that, and that's what's on the commissary,
Wow.
Like from your opinion, if you're eating ramen noodles every day like most of these guys do, let me give you a breakdown of what most people are eating if they're skipping the chow hall. Because obviously the chow hall is a little bit healthier for you, and you can get a heart-healthy meal or a vegetarian meal too. Well, heart-healthy, they'll give you beans and whatnot. But anyways, if you're not going to the chow hall, what most guys do is they'll take ramen noodles, 2 packs of ramen noodles. So what is that, 1,200 milligrams each. Then they'll add in some Doritos to give it some crunch to it. They'll add in some mayo or some sweet chili to give it a little more flavor. And then they're mixing that all together, and then they're putting in a beef log, which is also another 2,000 milligrams of sodium.
Right.
Now, do that twice a day. What are the health concerns of that if you're eating that twice a day?
Well, if you're young, you might be able to handle it. But if you're older, you can get high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, kidney issues. But most of the time, if you're young and healthy, your kidney can push it out. You just would pee a lot. Mm-hmm. You might get some swelling. But if you're older, if you have medical problems, it could elevate your blood pressure easily. And it can cause heart failure because the sodium brings a lot of water or fluid into your blood vessels, which expands everything. So it makes your heart pushing out harder. So that is definitely a stress test, a big stress test on your heart.
So if you're an older gentleman going to prison, you should stay away from the commissary. Like say someone your age, was going to prison.
You said that twice that we're old.
No, he said you right now, just you, not me.
I'm saying your guys' age.
Just kidding, yeah,
your guys' age. You're going to prison because there's a lot of people that would, that could relate to that.
Right.
Like a Steve Bannon or whoever that is going to prison. Should they be staying away from the commissary items at that age?
Well, the commissary is not the chow hall, right?
It's not the chow. We got them using prison lingo now.
And the shoe.
Yeah, it's not any of that. This is straight like you buy chips, you buy sodas.
And who do you buy this from?
The prison system has it.
Oh, it's like a 7-Eleven.
It's like a snack
yeah,
bar?
it's like a what is it in the military?
The mess.
An RX.
Okay. Not the mess hall, but the thing.
Yeah.
The PX.
The PX.
RX is something else.
It's like a PX, where you're going there and you're picking out. You get to go once a week and you can order your hostesses and your cookies and your condiments and your sauces.
Right. So if you're over the age of 40 and if you have a family history of high blood pressure, you got to stay away from that salt because that's going to elevate your blood pressure significantly and also put extra pressure on your heart. Somebody like you who's in the 20s probably can handle it, but especially if you're doing a lot of exercise and stuff like that, you're sweating out a lot of the salt. Mm-hmm. But if someone our age, it would be dangerous.
Gotcha. Well, that's very knowledgeable for individuals.
Why don't we talk about the biggest issues involving the prison system, in your opinion, and what could be done to change those?
They don't have Dr. Jeff Michaelis on site. No, I just think one of the biggest things is the staffing ratios. I mean, a counselor, a case manager, even the healthcare professionals, individuals that are designed, put in place to help, rehabilitate or help with reentry, their caseload is one of them to 400 inmates. How can they do their job effectively?
Wow.
So staffing is a huge concern. Then you have the security where, you have one guard to 400 or 500 inmates. Prison's a very dangerous place, especially in these higher facility prisons. There's a ton of understaffing. It's very dangerous. And none of these places are actually giving you the tools you need to succeed. Like a lot of the stuff you see on TV with the college programs and whatnot, those are a dime a dozen, where there's good individual like correctional facility programs. A lot of these are understaffed. It's inmates that are underqualified to teach individuals that'll like sign up. Like say you're a guy that was a school teacher that got in prison for fraud or anything like that. They're going to put you in charge in the library to teach.
Oh, really? So the inmates are teaching the inmates?
Inmates are teaching unless you need your GED. That is done by a licensed, instructor that they hire because that's mandatory. All inmates need to have at least their GED or you get put in that class. So those are hired outside teachers. Otherwise, the inmates are the ones doing the regular classes for like points, good time points and whatnot, electives, that type of thing. It's all inmate taught.
And what about patients that have medical problems? Do they go in a separate prison or they're just part of any prison? No,
you'll see a ton of like older gentlemen in wheelchairs. They just put them on the ground floor so it's wheelchair accessible. A lot of the times they're not really messed with. Like no one's going after like a handicapped person or anyone like that or screwing with them. In the prisons I was at where there were, handicapped people, a lot of the times they were there for sexual offenses. Unless they had aged over time because they were there for many years. But, it's they're not getting the best health care. There'll be a pill line. They'll call pill line like after the evening meal or before it. You'll get your pills for the day. They put the flashlight up to make sure you're taking it. So you're not like taking it out of your mouth to try and sell it. But it's not the best, it's very poorly ran.
What about gangs? Are there gangs in these prisons?
So in federal prison, at least on the East Coast, they're not really called gangs. They're called cars. So, and that's kind of designed by your state. So like if you're in Danbury, you're going to ride with like the Connecticut car because you're from Connecticut. Then there's the New York car, the New Jersey car. There's different cars, they call them, because you're all riding in the car. So, just taught you some more lingo.
Yeah, thank you. So you sort of hang with your car. Is that
you
what
hang
happens?
with your car. So what happens is you have to show your paperwork to show that you're not a rat or a sex offender. And if you're not any of those, then you're good. You ride with the car.
What paperwork?
So your sentencing transcript showing that you didn't get any, time taken off for assisting the government and cooperating and whatnot.
So that's the rat part.
Yeah. So say Jeff gets sentenced to prison his first day, they're going to come to you. Probably the white guys and probably people from Connecticut because you live in Connecticut, and they'll say, hey, we'd like to see your paperwork. And you're going to show them your paperwork.
What's on the paperwork?
Just, your transcript to see if the judge said, hey, Mr. Michaelis, thank you so much for cooperating. I'm reducing your time by 2 years for your cooperation. That's what that would do.
So what would happen with someone like a celebrity like Steve Bannon show up in prison? What's going to happen to him?
I've been, reporting this on the news, but I believe because he has such a short sentence, they're going to put him in solitary. The government, the prison system is not going to want to deal with the hassle of anything happen. Imagine you have a guy like Steve Bannon, goes to prison for just 4 months, and someone's extorting him, or he gets stabbed or anything, because there's crazy individuals out there. I'm sure Steve Bannon would love for that to happen because they can use that as ammunition. Not him physically loving it, but the idea of it, because that would start, a tremendous outburst of the system. And maybe even the system needs something like that to happen in order for change to be made. But I just think they're going to end up putting him in solitary. If I was the warden, that's probably what I would do.
So he would be alone.
Yeah, he would be in a cell alone. I mean, he's in a guy like him would normally, he's in a unique position. A guy like him would normally go to a camp. If you guys got sentenced to prison today with no priors, you would go to a camp. But because of his pending cases, like George Papadopoulos, who was also arrested a part of that Trump era, I was in prison with him at a camp for 2 weeks. So that's a totally different experience. But Steve has to go to a low because he has detainers on him.
So you get out of prison when?
I got out in January 2019.
At what age?
I was 23 or 24.
And then you tell us about the process of starting your podcast. How did that, what was the beginning of that, and what did it morph into?
So when I got out of prison, I wanted to get back in the nightclub business. That didn't work out. I realized you're going to need money. You're going to need investors. I didn't have any of those relationships. And thank God it didn't work out because COVID happened a year later. I ended up getting a job at Whole Foods, which I was working before I got my bond revoked at the Danbury Whole Foods. And I started at $15 an hour as a hot bar cook, worked my way up. And, 3 years, I was making almost $33 an hour. I was going to make over $100K that year with the overtime I was working. I lived in Long Island working for them. I was in the city, helped them open up new stores. And that job allowed me to, build up my credit, which I never had before, get an apartment, get a dog, get a car, all of these things. But the thing is, when you're entrepreneurial and you're working for someone else, there's always like that mindset of like, I don't want to do this. And you have kind of that passion growing. And in corporate, the bad workers get promoted and the good workers are kind of like just stuck there. So I kind of hit like a point where it's like you can't move up unless you do the X amount of time. And, I was like, I don't want to set my own limits on that. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you are your own limit. Like you could do as much as you want to do. And so I simultaneously, my friend from the nightclub days was saying, hey, you should start telling your story on TikTok. And I started telling my story on TikTok. It got a little traction, just talking about the nightclub and stuff. But my 5th video, I had COVID and I was in bed. And I called my friend all stuffy and whatnot. And I said, hey, I can't post today. I'm not feeling good. And he said, Ian, if you're going to do this, you got to be consistent. And so I made the video stuffy, raspy, and it wasn't about the nightclub. It was about prison and solitary. And that ended up going viral. In my parents' house and in my bedroom, did 2 million views overnight. Yep, blew it up. And then I just started making content from my car 3 to 5 times a day. Wasn't making any money because I wasn't at that limit yet on TikTok. Wasn't making any money. I was making a little money on Facebook, but I basically racked up about 30 grand in credit card debt from leaving Whole Foods to when I actually started to produce money from the podcast like 9 months later. And as I was building my page, I was simultaneously posting the clips on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube. And then that's when I got the idea to do the podcast in December 2022, started at January 2023. First 4 to 5 months, it was just a grind, posting episodes, not getting that many views. And then one day I did like 14 million views on a clip talking about me paying for protection in federal prison. And because of my look, my rosy cheeks, my glasses, I'm white, people are like, there's no way this guy went to prison. So it was clickbaity, and everyone clicked on it, and it just blew everything up. And that's when I started learning the art of interviewing, studying other podcasters, not interrupting the guests, watching the feedback of what people are saying. And it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And it was last June where we finally hit the charts. We were like top 50 for society and culture. Now we're consistently in the top 200 for all podcasts. And we've really turned it into a business. We have the studio. Before I was sharing with someone else in another state. Now I've built this and I'm starting a studio business, and it's just expanding. And, you know, as time goes on, I get better with my business skills. I've always never had the business skills. I've had the marketing skills. I'm a great marketer, was never a great business person. So now I'm learning the business aspect, but applying the marketing skills I had as a club owner.
Did you learn anything in prison at all that helped you, or that was just time that was wasted?
Looking back on it, I mean, what I learned was what is my biggest asset, the experience. But in regards to just learning things in general, no. You don't necessarily learn anything. You kind of create your own value in there. Some people use the time to read. Like I used to read a book a day when I was in prison. I read a lot of fantasy like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings just to keep that imagination going. But it was really the experience that would turn into my biggest asset. Everything I was taking in around me, everything that was happening to me.
And that's so true that, you know, but for him, Ian going to prison, he would not have everything that he has today, because this podcast of yours is so salacious, so interesting. You know, it allows people to pull a curtain back on some aspect of others' lives that they know so little about.
Yeah, I mean, something I think about now is like cause and effect, which is something I never realized before. Now I'm very calculated in my decisions. I'm always thinking about things. And like, you look at the bigger picture, like the three of us wouldn't be sitting here if I never went to prison. Like literally prison brought us together, and the domino effect that happened after that. And when you look at things like that and anything in life, it kind of changes your outlook, and it makes you more appreciative, and it makes you want to give back more, and it makes you just a better person.
And, you know, ironically, the reason that you're doing so well now is what got you into prison, and that's being wildly entrepreneurial. You know, now that you're doing it the right way, as opposed to before you were looking for the shortcuts and the easy way, and that created some challenges for you.
And also taking a huge risk. Because it was you ask anyone, I mean, to leave a stable job when you're already, you know, almost $500,000 in debt restitution, racking up more credit card debt, it was a huge risk, you know, and I'm getting the fruits of it now, but a lot of people couldn't do that. And that's totally understandable.
It's a great life lesson. And what I find so interesting is that you are relatively young, and that you have learned a lot of information, especially about life, about business, about marketing, and you're making very good choices now. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, you know, life is on-the-job training. We learn because of the mistakes that we made, and some people repeat those mistakes, and others learn from them and do things in a much, much better way. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get back to the podcast because I'm fascinated by the traction that you've gotten on this. So you started the podcast in January of 2023.
Correct, yeah.
And then what type of traction have you gotten with your podcast?
It started, I remember, you know, when episodes first came out, I was excited just to hit 1,000 views on a video in 48 hours was my goal. And on audio, it was like 1,000. Audio is very hard to grow, like that's Spotify, Apple, and whatnot. So that was my goal. And now, you know, like a year later, now I'm excited to hit 10,000. That is my baseline in 24 hours. And you look at, like, people sometimes will say to me, like friends that are close, oh, that was a slower episode. It's not at X amount, or it looks weak. And I look back and I'm like, I remember first starting on YouTube a year ago, one of the hardest platforms to build on, I couldn't even get 1,000 views. So every time I'm making progression, each month the subscribers go up. Even if it's a little bit, it just continues to grow and grow. Followers across all platforms. I have over almost 2 million now across all platforms.
Wow.
You know, TikTok is my biggest at almost 800,000. YouTube's 250,000. Facebook's 120,000. Snapchat, Instagram. So it's getting up there, and it's just continuously growing. And I think what I've learned, the biggest lesson I've learned on social media is it's all about personality. People fall in love with the person. And the best example I use for this is you take a lot of these female or male influencers on, say, TikTok, which is an easier platform to grow on because there's more ability to go viral. When they try to make a YouTube channel to do a podcast, they kind of fail. They can't get the views because they're not necessarily themselves a likable person. People follow you because of likability, because of your knowledge, because of how you present yourself. So when people get to learn the real you and that you're not trying to be someone that you're not, then I think that's when it explodes. And that's why I was able to authentically build this.
But that works for every field, any kind of field that's personal. You got to be yourself. And my medical field is the same thing, that people will come to you if you can relate to them, if they can relate to you. I'm sure your field also. These are person-to-person interactions. And I think that's a great description that encompasses almost not every field, but a lot of the fields. And that's a great learning tool.
Yeah.
I don't know where you got that from, but probably just figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just taking it in and looking at the data of why some people excel in it. Like I have so many people that come to me and they're like, we want to do a podcast, we want to do this. And a lot of it is patience. Like you guys, you show up every week, you record, you're consistent. Eventually, it's going to work out.
I have a good story. And when we went to medical school, we're learning all this information, right? And you're interviewing patients and you're going through it and you're going through the checklist and you're looking at the thing and you're barely looking at the patient. And then you learn that you got to actually look at the person and listen to them. That's not an easy thing to learn.
Yeah.
And that you learn later on. But that's a great, what you said, it was very, very applicable to multiple fields.
Thank you, doctor.
No problem.
People want to do business with those they know, like, and trust. And if you get people to know you and to like you and to trust you, then the world is your oyster.
Right.
And it's also not judging people firsthand.
True.
And I think that's something you guys have learned a lot just from hanging out with me and us becoming friends. And I think that helps. You kind of you get a perspective, you see it in a different perspective. Because I'm sure you guys as individuals have people that are friends with you that are maybe curious of how this relationship came to be. But it's a lesson in itself in regards to that. Second chances, giving people that, and getting to know someone.
That's a great point. You were peers with my children, and so I said to them, "I'm doing a podcast with Ian Bick." They said, "Ian Bick? My God, I went to high school with him. He was the kid with all the problems." I said, "Well, he grew up. And he's a good kid."
Yeah.
And it's really a story about redemption, which, we all make mistakes in our lives. Some of us make mistakes on a larger stage. Many of us don't make mistakes big enough to go to a federal prison, but you have taken that experience and you've turned it into something incredibly positive, and it's quite remarkable.
Well, thank you.
So I want to talk about some of your biggest successes. And I met one of the gentlemen here, the guard from Rikers. How many views does he have currently on his, a reel? Yeah,
on that one clip, that was a 20 million view clip. Like in this business, you don't know what's going to hit. And a funny story about that is that wasn't a clip I had picked out. So what ended up happening is that I'm sitting on a couch watching TV, and I was like, let me post this up. This wasn't in my plans to post. I have all my clips picked for the week, but something just said, let me clip this and let me post it. And it just blew up, and it's still going viral. And 20 million views on one clip. The full version has over 400,000 plays.
Wow.
And he just became like this household, item, people know him. And that just goes to show personality, likability, and being yourself and not interrupting. Because that man, if he went on any other podcast where there's constant back and forth interruption, it wouldn't have worked. It was because the clip was so set up. I think I only appeared in it once when I was laughing, and then at the end to wrap it up saying thank you or whatever. But in that clip, it's all him. And you could see the emotion. You could see him, just the drama in it, and that just made it work.
Yeah, we met him. He's a great storyteller. He talks very slowly, but he's a great storyteller, right?
And he is the epitome of someone you know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
I mean, you meet this guy, and he is so genuine that when you hear him talk, you're like, wow. And you're mesmerized by his stories. And everybody loves a good story. And that's what I think one of the great successes of your podcast deals with, and that is real people telling real stories.
That you don't hear every day. Like if you have a celebrity on, that same celebrity is telling their same story on 20 other podcasts. Here, which is like your model too, you're getting individuals who no one's ever heard of or seen before, but they're interesting. Like the guests you guys have are genuinely interesting. It's just a matter of how do you bring out the entertainment in that interest, which is something I've nailed, and it's something you'll eventually figure out as you continue. It's just making it's making it give value, but also entertaining.
But you're also giving a room or a speech to people that normally are not out there talking, right? Like this guard, right? He would never, ever be on Johnny Carson or any of these shows. But you're allowing people that are behind the scenes that might have not had a great career or might not have a great life. You're allowing them to come and talk. So these are people that we don't usually hear from.
Yeah, I mean,
you're allowing that to happen.
I look at like the CNN, me going on it the last week. They wouldn't have just randomly called me up if it was anyone else. It was because I've been able to build this platform and get out there. But think about all the people that could have gave an accurate description of what goes on there. But so that's what society's doing. They don't necessarily call on the people that are the right people to share their experience. And that's what I've been able to do with my platform.
You're opening the world to these people.
Exactly. And they all are humans that a lot of them came from the same places we came from, good families. And then you see and you feel for the ones that came from the bad families where they didn't choose the life that was given to them. And that goes to parenting and to the roots and all of that.
You know what I found very interesting was I was talking to Ian last week, and he was going on CNN later that afternoon. And I said to him, "Are you nervous?" And he goes, "No, this is what I do." And I'm thinking to myself, to go live on CNN and to talk about something and have questions asked of him, I thought was fascinating at this young age to be that confident and in what he does here. So let's talk about what's next for you.
I mean, I just want to, more than ever, like I've found in life that I don't necessarily want to diverse into all these different directions. Like I want to do stuff that I'm passionate about and that I want to do. And I also have to remember, like sometimes my brain is like, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then I have to stick to my roots of what I'm good at and what's working. And then from there, you start making the smart moves to set yourself up for the future. But I'm learning even like through the studio business, I'd rather have one podcast that I could work with and grow than a bunch of people that aren't serious about creating a podcast. And then I could focus on my podcast, continue to grow it, and that person that's serious about doing it. I don't want to spread myself too thin. I'm realizing how valuable my time is now. I like kind of staying in. I don't go out like what I used to do. I'm just a lot more cautious and a lot more, always thinking, and we're enhancing the show, like adding in different types of clips and visuals and doing all these things. And I just see Locked In hasn't even scratched the surface because there's such a big audience out there that we haven't even tapped into. And it's only a matter of time before it gets to that level. And then you have a book and public speaking and all these different doors and avenues that I think will come over time.
And the other thing that I think is great is CNN has already said to you they want to have you back, as their speaker when there are any things having to do with the correctional system. And then not to out the person, which we won't do right now, but you also have a guest coming on that I think is huge that will add such tremendous value to your listeners.
All thanks to you.
Well, not thanks to me so much, but it's...
Yes, thanks to you.
All right, so it's all because of me. But
anyway.
Know
what I was thinking about is that is fate. That's when, you're prepared, hard work, it just happens. Like you're brought to someone by fate like that because you ran into this individual at a supermarket and we've reached out before. We tried to get a hold of him and the timing aligned. And maybe that's the universe or whatever you believe in working, but that's what I look at and I'm like, it's meant to be. Like that's what I'm doing now. That's how I know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing because it works so perfectly. Like money's coming in, connections, relationships, everything. And that's why I'm so fixated on making sure I continue to do what I'm doing because when I go off the path and to try to do other things, it doesn't work as easily. So it kind of shows you what your focus should be. It's
funny that people would say to me, "Oh, you're very lucky." And I tell them luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So you prepare yourself, and then when the opportunity arises, you realize that is something that you can take advantage of or exploit, and then that becomes that much easier for you to do in the future. So as our time is drawing to a close, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give us your words of wisdom. What have you learned? What would you like to share? And how would you like to close this out?
Doc, Attorney Hastings, thank you for having me. And, we definitely covered a lot of lessons I think that the audience will take away from this episode. And, I'm very grateful to have met you guys and, have you guys kind of like as a mentor. We shoot ideas back and forth from each other. And I just think that's a lesson in itself, having people that have experienced what you might not have experienced just surrounding you. Something that always gotten me into trouble as a kid was having the wrong people around me. You guys, like when I first reconnected with you, Richard, I didn't necessarily was in the same position I'm in now. And you haven't changed at all seeing me grow. Whereas when I was doing the club, to put it into perspective, I had all these individuals around me when I was at the top of the world. And as soon as I wasn't, they're all gone. So you have individuals in your life that will be there. Like if I lost everything tomorrow, you guys would still be there. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm starting to prioritize in my life too, those individuals. Because there's so many people that just, walk out. Just like Matt, he's someone that's been around me since the club days. He stayed throughout all that. But 99% of the people didn't, because no one anticipated I would be able to rebuild to the level I'm at now.
And we've learned a tremendous amount from you, and I thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.